Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen, and dear students. If you recall, last time we had been discussing marketing, strategic marketing management, and we had started the concept of competitive advantage. The reason why we were focused on competitive advantage is that it is at the business unit level strategy that the focus of the organization is to create some sort of competitive advantage in the market. And the focus of the competitive strategy will continuously be on maintaining and sustaining this advantage over a period of time. At that time, we had also suggested that competitive advantage is basically a value, a unique value that is being given to the customer by the firm as opposed to what is available from the competitors. And that is why the competitive strategy is what it is called, and therefore the focus of competitive strategy rests on the issue of competitive advantage. However, competitive advantage is a concept which is not very clear in the minds of the practitioners because it is very difficult to understand why do customers buy the product. The logic is the customers must have some kind of value that they believe is very important for them and for which they are ready to pay a specific amount of money or spend their resources in acquiring that value. Now, to be able to understand this, we have to look at it in a little bit more detail so that as we go along, we need to start thinking about focusing on this issue in a more perceptive manner. To be able to achieve this, I'll give you some examples and then we will try and focus on the real sources that we have as competitive advantage. So the first thing that we come to mind is to differentiate between what is a source of competitive advantage and what is competitive advantage. These two things are different. But before we start our lecture, we need to go back and reiterate what we suggested at that point of time in terms of strategic marketing management, the areas where marketing comes into play in terms of the corporate strategy, the business strategy, and the functional strategies. If you recall, we had said that corporate level strategies are only related to three things: which business to be in, and marketing becomes very crucial in trying to understand the kind of industry or business there is, and marketing helps in the analysis of that particular area. On the other side, we also suggested that in the business strategy area, the normal strategy is focused on the sources of competitive advantage, and we assume that marketing actually tries to focus on it because it is the marketing concept that suggests that the marketing would try and understand the need of the customer, which is where the source of competitive advantage can rest. Because if the company can provide that specific need satisfying value, the company will have a competitive advantage which will be more than what any other competitor can do. Therefore, marketing becomes crucial in that area also. And finally, in trying to position the product or position the value proposition in the mind of the consumer, which will ultimately help to understand how to sustain this competitive advantage, the 4P theory, or what we call the STP frame, segmentation, targeting, and positioning, comes into play. But all along this whole framework, we need to recognize that all these things are being done for an elusive. Elusive is a concept जो कि clearly समझ नहीं आ रहा, लेकिन it is there, it is very significant. And for this purpose, let me give you an example. It's a hypothetical example. Using this, we will build a framework for it. And then I will give you a practical example to demonstrate what the issues really are. I actually gave you another example in the last session where I talked about a company which was a chemical company and the reason why people or the customers were buying the product from them. Now, let's assume that a company, let's say B, which is competing against a company A, and both the companies have similar product, similar production processes, everything is more or less similar. And this company A now goes ahead and finds a machine or a process which will help the company reduce the price by about 20%. Now, the company goes into production, reduces the price, reduces the cost of production. Now, it has a choice. Either it can stay with the same old price as was already available in the market, or it can try and gain a competitive advantage. And the way it can gain competitive advantage is by, let's say, reducing the price. And let's say it reduces the price by 20%. Now, at this point of time, between these two companies, A and company B, company A has suddenly achieved an advantage of 20% lower prices. However, the important point is, how would the market react to this? Now, if the market believes that this 20% reduction in price given the product is a value proposition that they prefer, they will move to buy company A's product more than company B's product. At this point of time, this advantage will lie for a point of time where either of the two things happen. Either company B tries to reduce the price immediately at 20% level and nullifies the impact. That means creates a parity value in the system. Or if it cannot do it immediately, they will like to perhaps try and move to buy the similar kind of machine and set up the process which will help them reduce their costs and also reduce their price. Now, this second situation, the advantage to company A will be a little longer period of time. However, the third possibility is that this company tries to add advertising, try to bring some new promotional frame and maintain that same price level because they don't want to drop their price because they perhaps cannot drop their price based on their cost factors. And at this point of time, if the market responds to their promotion and does not shift from B to A, we now know that price reduction was not the competitive advantage. Now, three things have happened here, and we must try and understand what has happened. Number one, a point of differentiation or a point of competitive advantage, which was price-based, was created in the market by company A. The value perception of the market will actually tell us whether this change in price was real value to the customers. If they shift, it will be assumed that the price was the advantageous point, and because the price had gone down, created value for the customer, so customers shift. However, if the customers do not shift, then our perception would be that something else is a source of competitive advantage, and that competitive advantage rests with company B. Now, here are 2 points that are coming into position very quickly. That is that the price was, if the market accepts that and the market shifts from B to A, we can assume without any complication that price is the competitive advantage. However, watch very carefully. Source of competitive advantage is not the price. The source of competitive advantage is the machinery that reduce the cost factors. Now, this is an important distinction that we need to recognize. Again, I'm repeating that the price is the point of competitive advantage. However, the source of competitive advantage lies in the machine or the process which helped the company reduce their cost by about 20%, which was then translated into price reduction. So the second point that comes into position is that there is a source of competitive advantage, but you have to translate that source into actual competitive advantage. So that becomes a critical point in the competitive strategy frame where marketing strategy and strategic marketing management moves into position. So we have to have a source, and that source has to be aligned to a value system in the customer's mind. Once this has been translated, we can say there is a competitive advantage. However, how long is this competitive advantage going to lie? That's the second important point. In our case, if company B had reduced the prices immediately, this advantage was very short-lived. However, if the advantage was till the point of time that the other company could find processes and machinery to help them reduce their price or reduce their cost and then reduce their price, then it was for a little longer period of time. Therefore, sustainability of competitive advantage was longer period. In the third case, where nobody moved from B to A and B sustained its market, then there must be a source sitting in the B company which was linked with the value proposition in the market, and they had been able to achieve a longer sustainable competitive advantage because company A could not shift the market from B to A. So we have now a clear picture of what can happen. Having said this, I'll now take you to a practical example, and that is Coca-Cola. In late 80s, Coca-Cola company was competing very aggressively against Pepsi-Cola in America, and we're talking about America. Coca-Cola had a very large market share. At that point of time, it most probably controlled close to about 60% of the overall American market, and then Pepsi had about 20, and then there were so many other products like Dr. Pepper, RC Colas, and so on and so forth. Pepsi-Cola launched a very aggressive promotional campaign against Coca-Cola, and in one of their frames, what they had done was that they had arranged on the television a blind taste test kind of a thing. What basically blind taste tests are, that you put glasses filled with beverages, Coca-Cola and Pepsi. Nobody knows which glass has what. The only people who know are the umpires or the referees. So at this point of time, what Pepsi did out in the open in front of cameras, that they invited the people, both Coca-Cola loyal people as well as Pepsi loyal people, and they asked them to drink from these glasses and then report which drink they thought was the best. Now, having done this, what happened was that at the end of this test frame, the results that came in was that most of the loyal Coca-Cola drinkers preferred Pepsi as their preferred drink at that point of time. Now, this created a lot of confusion in the market. There was sudden shift from Coca-Cola to Pepsi because this came out all in the open. Coca-Cola got worried because their market share started slipping, and then they immediately went into R&D and started planning on how to improve their taste, because they thought taste was the problem in this situation. If we know, we can see that Pepsi-Cola is a little bit more sugary, Coca-Cola is not. But given this test results, Coca-Cola quickly moved into R&D. It took them substantial amount of time as well as substantial amount of money to be able to develop a new taste. Now, this new taste, they went into a series of tests across America, and in each test, they found that the new formula was the preferred drink. Having gone through all this process over a period of time, they decided to launch the new Coke. As they did that, they found that they lost markets more. The market share started falling because those people who were loyal to Coca-Cola, for one reason or the other, did not accept this new Coke that came into the market. Subsequent of this, a lot of loyal Coca-Cola consumers, what we call in Urdu, उन्होंने घिराव किया of the Coca-Cola की जो head office है, they surrounded the head office and they refused to allow anybody to leave till the old Coke was restored. Now, this created complications. However, after some time of efforts by the company people, it was accepted that they should bring back the old Coke. And what we now have is what they call the classic Coke. When that Coke came back, the old formula was relaunched. The whole concept was taken away. The new Coke was taken away. The classic Coke came back into position, and Coca-Cola captured its markets again. So the market shifted back to Coca-Cola from Pepsi. Now, this small example suggested that even in this particular case of Coca-Cola and Pepsi, it was not the taste that was the competitive advantage that rested with Coca-Cola, even though they took it wrong. The real reason was that people had become loyal to the brand. So the brand itself became the source of competitive advantage. That was the source of competitive advantage. That was the reason why people were buying Coca-Cola and not because of the taste. Now, this example, this real example, as well as the hypothetical example that I've given you earlier, suggests that there is something called a source ambiguity. Source ambiguity means that we are not very clear as to what is the true factor behind a company's success in the market. However, philosophically, theoretically, conceptually, we all agree that that reason of the success of the company actually rests in the competitive advantage that A company has over B company in the minds, and I'm repeating the word, in the minds or the perceptions of the customers. Now, this makes 3 points very clear. Number one, that there is source ambiguity. That means companies seldom try to understand what the source of their competitive advantage is. Two, source of competitive advantage lasts so long as the competitor does not achieve a similar level of advantage using the same technique. So competitive advantage lasts for that period of time. Third, competitive advantage actually is related to the customer's perception. Unless and until the customer perceives that there is an advantage, there cannot be an advantage. And so long as the competitor continues to recognize this value proposition, there will be this advantage which will be lasting over the period of time that the competitive advantage remains in position. Okay, now having explained this to you, and then I will also obviously explain these further on the chart of how this whole thing is formulated, let me now come to the point where we need to understand that the competitive advantage as a significant theory has been there since Michael Porter first voiced it. Michael Porter in 1985 started discussing his theories about strategies, generic strategies, and competitive advantage. Now, we have to understand where all in the system these sources can lie so that we are becoming clearer about where the source of competitive advantage can be located. Now, we have said that, like I've given you the example of that 20% reduction in process systems, it could be located in technology, where a process can be brought into position which will help either improve quality or reduce prices. Now, obviously, reduce prices or improve quality has to be translated into the market area, and that translation must fit with the requirements of the customer. Now, if I understand this, that it is actually the customer's need that has been targeted using a source which is located inside the company, and the connectivity between the two, the source and its translation into competitive advantage by fitting it with the customer's need, we will call this the strategic fit. Now, this is an important concept. We will come to it at a later stage in major detail, but it's a simple thing to understand that we are creating a fit. We are creating a fit between the source of competitive advantage, which is lying in the company. It has to be translated in some kind of action, some kind of behavior, some kind of position, and that position must fit with the customer's need, customer's value, customers' requirements. When we connect these two, we call this strategic fit. And whenever we can find a strategic fit, we can say that we have a point where we have a competitive advantage. So strategic fit is between the source of the company or the resources within the company, which is being translated into an advantage by fitting that source with the need, requirements of the customer. And it is here that we also should be able to link ourselves in our minds the concept of segmentation, targeting, and positioning. Segmentation, grouping the market, targeting the one that really is where we can satisfy a customer's need by using our resources, and that positioning is the way how we will position or put the value proposition in the market. So now if you look at it, the strategic marketing management concept or the strategic marketing comes into position using this logic of competitive advantage. The final point that is important in terms of competitive advantage is where are the sources and how do the sources get translated. So one linking factor between the source inside the company, it does not automatically move into the market. Obviously, it has to go through a process, and that process is the strategy process. The way you will strategize to bring this source or the source of competitive advantage and put it into the market, which will fit with the customer's need. So these 3 points are very critical in all our analysis, which we will be doing for the purposes of determining where the resources lie. Now, if I have said this, let's recapitulate all the factors, and we say there is something as a resource of the competitive advantage. Naturally, that resource lies in the company. 2, there is something in the value system of the customer which needs to be targeted, which needs to create, which will be used to create the strategic fit. So there are multiple points in the market. So the customers within the same segment may have multiple points of needs and value propositions, value creating points, which will be used by all competitors. Number 3, that if more than one competitor targets the same need, one of them will either succeed because it has a better proposition compared to another one, or if they are targeting different needs, then each one will be able to survive because each one is providing a specific value proposition. Therefore, we can say very comfortably that in any competitive situation, and if you recall last lecture, and I talked about monopolistic competition from the economic framework and said all companies who are competing and are successful are normally monopolistic competitors because they have been able to create their own monopolies around their own competitive advantage frameworks, and that is where they are sustaining their performances. And we have given 2-3 examples earlier to establish that framework. Now, finally, since we are talked about the resources, we have talked about what the value system in the market is, so we will talk about it. And the link that is created between the 3, we have already mentioned that it is purely because of the strategy. So at least we have now 3 points to establish where and how to locate the competitive advantage. We will discuss this more in the subsequent lectures. The only thing left which we would like to take care of and which is very strong in our literature is how does this delivery of the value takes place from the company inside, and how this whole value proposition is developed to put it into market. Now, this is where we will be discussing the value chain, which is again one of the leading concepts that have been provided by Michael Porter, and it is very strongly entrenched in all our discussions regarding value chain analysis. So if I was to be able to put these 4 points in view, we will be discussing them in the sequence that I am explaining now. We will discuss the resource-based theory. It's a very strong theory developed in around 1980s. There are very strong authors who have been behind this movement. Werner Felt is one, Barney is another, and they were writing around 1980, 84, 85. At the same time when Michael Porter was developing his theory of competitive advantage and his theory of generic strategies and value chain analysis. Then we will also like to talk about another source of competitive advantage, which is what we call market orientation, because what we said was one of the links in the competitive advantage framework is the need system analysis of the customer. And one of the major tools which is being available in terms of marketing is market orientation. And finally, as I've said to you before, there is something called the value chain, which brings the value from the basic logic of how the product is to be created, including how the raw material moves in and how the value is given to the market. Finally, and at this point then I will end, and before I move to explain the model that I have to explain where sustainable competitive advantage will lie, the issue is that there is something, like I told you in my example, which was a hypothetical example, where I had created a company A which had reduced its price, but company B was able to sustain its advantage in the market, and which suggests that the customers of company B were ready to pay 20% more for the product that they were selling as against company A, which had reduced the price by 20%. This now brings into position a concept which will be very critical when we are understanding the value chain, is the willingness of the customer to pay. Therefore, if we look at it, all these things, willingness of the customer to pay is the response to the value proposition and the competitive advantage that is being created. I will just take a minute here to explain the point which is very important, कि willingness of the customer to pay क्यों important हो गई। वजह यह है कि अगर मैंने वैल्यू क्रिएट की है कस्टमर के लिए, तो कस्टमर उसको रिस्पॉन्ड कैसे करेगा? वो ऐसे ही करेगा कि उसकी कीमत पे करने के लिए वो तैयार होगा। नाउ अगर कंपनी बी का जो मैंने एग्जांपल दिया था, इफ दैट कंपनी हैज सस्टेन्ड द प्राइस, दैट मीन्स देयर customers are ready and willing to pay 20% more. This willingness to pay 20% more in the market explains to us that there is a competitive advantage, and the outcome of that competitive advantage is the willingness of the customer to pay this price. Now, this is a very significant concept, and I will bring this to using the the board on the charts, and so that we can once in one go we can understand two concepts, that is willingness to pay, how does that fit into position, and then the where the sustainable competitive advantage comes into position, and how can we look at it by the combination of these 3 points: the need of the market, the resources of the company, and the strategy. Okay, so once I have done this, I'll take you to the board. Okay, now to the board, I'll explain the two concepts that I talked to you about. The first one is the willingness to pay. Simple to understand, but you need to apply this in logic. And I'll draw this whole thing in a very simple manner so you understand. We know that a company has its bottom point where it can put its price is where its cost of raw material purchase and production takes place. So let's take this point A as the point where production and cost of production moves into position. Okay, this is where the company is operating in terms of its value creation. So that's the start point. Now, it can set its price at point B. So we can call point A as the cost of production and point B as the price. Logically then, the gap between A and B is the value to the company. Obviously, we have already discussed in our marketing, basic marketing courses, that company in marketing must be able to make money for itself or create value for itself. That is the logic. Otherwise, it will not be able to survive. and we say to ourselves, fine, this we call the value to the company. Now, there is an interesting point here. Let me explain this in a little bit logic before I move, and I can put the price here also. Let's say the price is 10 rupees and the cost is 5 rupees, which means the value to the the value to the company is equal to 5 rupees. Okay. Now, let's assume that the company tries to reduce its cost. So it can get to a point which is A.1, and this A.1 is using the cost reduction processes. And what has happened is that the company has been able to add value to itself. Unless and until the company has done this, but it does not translate this into price change, we can say that the company A has been able to create value for itself, but no additional value to the customer. Okay, now let's say that this company, by reducing its cost, was also able to improve value to itself. By reducing its cost, keeping the price at the same point, the company had been able to improve the value that the company could get out of the market, which is one of the reasons, the logic of why we are in business. Okay, but the second point that is important is that the company had not changed the price, not by reducing it or by increasing for whatever reasons. Now let's look at the second aspect of the equation. Let's say the company increases the price to rupees 12. From 10, it takes the price to rupees 12. And it suddenly finds that people are no more willing to pay that 2 rupees extra. Now, there is a point that is being created, that where is this willingness to pay of the marketing resting? Was it at rupees 10, which the company was already selling at? And now the company has shifted the price to 12, but the people are not ready to buy. So let's take another small example and say that the company puts the price at 11. At this point of time, the company's customers are ready to pay rupees 11. Now, think about it. When the price of the product was rupees 10, the customers were ready in their mind or willing to pay 11, which we found when we increased the price to rupees 11. But the customers were not willing to pay rupees 12 for the same product. Therefore, the willingness of the customer, which was at 11 and the price was at 10, created a value for the customer. So the gap between the price, existing price, and the willingness of the customer to pay a higher price is the actual value which goes to the customer. If the price is now at the point of time when the customer is willing to pay 11 and the price is also at 11, at this point of time, the customer has got no extra value coming to him or to her. Therefore, we can say very easily that by increasing this 1 rupee, without changing the cost frameworks, the company was able to add value to itself, but it has taken away the value from the customer. Now, this is a point where the market is now sitting at a level where any competitor moving in with the price little less than 11 will respond to that price change. Why? Because they would be able to get, even if, let me put it like this, if the competitor moves in and prices itself at 10 rupees 50 paisas, the customers can shift because they will find that 50 paisas as value for themselves. Now, therefore, given this whole framework, we have to recognize that the logic of marketing and all the business strategies is to continuously try and increase the value to the customer. Obviously, the value to the customer, as it goes higher, the possibility to charge higher prices also starts increasing. Now, if that price increase is translated properly, the company can make value for itself while still giving substantial value to the customer. So given these two logical points, we should become now clearer as to the concept of the willingness to pay and the value to the customer. So the value to the customer is basically the differential between the price and the customer's willingness to pay a higher price. Now, this may seem a very difficult concept to apply, but we can look at it from different angles. If you recall a concept called brand equity. Now, looking at this chart, we can say very simply that brand equity is actually the value to the customers that the brand or the product is creating. The people are ready to pay, or ready, like I'm saying, ready means willingness to pay a higher price for their product. And if the company is sensible, keeping its prices just to the amount where they will be making good value for themselves, they are giving extra value to the customers. By doing these two things, by utilizing these two frameworks, we can say we are now clear as to what is the logic of creating competitive advantage. Now, if you have a competitive advantage in the market, the logic will say the willingness to pay by the customer will continuously increase. As that willingness to pay increases, the company has a choice to continue to give the same product at the same price and take what value they had, so they will continuously get the same value, or by increasing their price and taking a small share of the value that they had created for the customer, they can also create value for themselves. So these 2 points work in tandem. Like I said, they are something that can work in combinations. Now, it is here that marketing moves into position. Marketing tries to understand where does the customer's value lie. And then the company tries to provide that kind of value, and I'm talking about value in terms of perceptual value and not price value. So they create that perceptual value to a point where the company becomes more, the customer becomes more attuned to respond to a given price increase, and they will have no issues. Here, there is a very good example that I can quote. I will not refer to the brands, but there was a very strong car brand. It was in the market for a long time. People had strong loyalties to that car, and it was a German car. Another German car manufacturer which was trying to launch against this value system of the car manufacturer, and let's call the car manufacturer A. The car manufacturer B tried to challenge A by saying that we give exactly the same value that car A is giving, but our prices are close to about $7,000 lower. The price was ranging something around $45,000 for car A, and the car B manufacturer tried to put its product in the market, giving the same quality of technology, comfort in the car, designing, and so on and so forth, for $7,000 less. When they launched this with a very strong advertising campaign, car company A lost its market in the initial stages over a 6-month period of time. So there was a lot of discussion within the A company as to how to respond to this issue. Some people had suggested that they also drop their prices, but a few in that company decided that their product was better, was more liked by the market. Without going into the concept of willingness to pay, they actually shifted their price by about $10,000. I'm just giving you ballpark numbers, not exact, but they shifted their price for a higher level. And look what happened. The market that they had started losing came back to them. The reason was basically very simple, that the market of A was willing to pay a higher price. And when the company increased this price, the market responded positively to that increase in price, because in their minds, even this 10,000 price increase was giving them sufficient amount of value that they did not mind losing some of it out of their share. And this is a good example of how these two things work. Now, since we are discussing competitive advantage, let me draw a chart for you and try and bring those 3 points onto the chart to explain the logic. And I said there has to be a point in the market which is lying there, and there could be multiple points. So we're not talking about one point, we are talking about multiple points. This is related to the customer. So let me draw a circle A, and we call this the customers. Okay. Now within the customers, we also, and because the customer has a need point, we understand this need point, we try and look at the resources of the company which could be the source of competitive advantage. So we call B the sources of the competitive advantage lying inside the company. So B is resources of the company, and A is the customer's needs. Now the third point was, like I said, to translate this resource through the competitive advantage system targeted onto the customer need, we call this strategy. So circle C tells us that the strategy is bringing 2 points together, one from the resources, one from the customer need analysis. And if we are able to link all of these three things up, this point, and I call this point D, becomes your sustainable competitive advantage. We call this normally sustainable competitive advantage as SCA. So if you look at the whole frame now, we become quite clear as to how these things are operating. When you have SCA, you have created value for the customer. And how did you do it? Using strategy, you have been able to link the resource of the competitive advantage, which is within the company, to a point outside the company, which is the customer need. Now, if we take these three things and all this framework together, we understand how actual competitive strategies are formulated, though we will talk about the actual strategy later on, but the logic has to be very clear. And the logic is becoming clear that the area of competitive strategies rests within the area of developing competitive advantage. So to recapitulate the whole discussion up till now, we have been able to suggest that marketing is an overarching philosophy. It is a boundary spanning role, and the boundary spanning role is between the company itself and the market in terms of determining what are the customer needs and how the customer need points are stretched. At this point of time, I would like to introduce a concept which I'll pick up in the next class in a more detailed form, that whatever we were discussing up till now, let's say I gave you an example of the oil company, we found that the success of that company was located in its inventory management system. That was the oil company that I gave an example earlier. In the Coca-Cola company, I gave you the example that it was the brand. Okay. In the example of the hypothetical example that I had created, where I said that price was reduced, if the price is accepted, then price was the important competitive advantage. If it was not accepted, the company sustained its customers, then it must have some other kind of competitive advantage area. Now, in all these points, the location and targets were what we call and what we will call in our discussion as the key success factors. Now, key success factor is that factor that a company must be able to target. And like I said, there are a number of points in the industry or in the segment that can be targeted. So logical then it says that there are more than one key success factor in the business. Now let's take this example like I was giving you about the hypothetical company, company B. If the company B was able to sustain what do you call its a price point without losing its market because of some other source or value that it had, and at the same time it also reduced its prices. Now what would happen is that even those people who were responding to market or company A's price reduction could shift to this company. Therefore, now company B has 2 points or key success factors in its control. One, where it was able to sustain its original market, and the second one, when it was able to attract people from company A's segment, giving us this feeling that maybe price was another key success factor. Like I said, it was not basically the price, but the factor behind it, and it is the process. So processes, sometimes economies of scale, and so on and so forth, they become key success factors in any given industry. So when we take a look and we try and carry out analysis about these frameworks, we will be using these concepts in a more detailed manner. And let me just, at this point of time, briefly suggest to you that we have been listening to something called EFE and IFE's internal factor analysis or evaluations, or the external factor evaluations, which is EFE. Why we do them? And the reason is very simple, that we are trying to understand how to create this link of competitive advantage between the two, the needs of the market, which is external factors, and the internal factors of the company, which can be linked, and the logical link is created by the strategies, the competitive strategies. Obviously, within the competitive strategies, our belief is that marketing strategy becomes the core issue, because that is where competitive advantages are created, particularly in markets which are basically monopolistic competition oriented. So if there is monopolistic competition, differentiation is the critical point. So we need to create these key success factors and link them up in that particular manner. So in the next class, I will pick up the two concepts. One is the key success factor, and then we will go into the logic of resource-based view of the firm, which is another theory that we are, which is very strongly grounded in the logic of strategic management, strategic marketing management. Okay, with this, I end the lecture, and we will meet you again in the next session. Thank you very much. Allah Hafiz.